facts and stats of UFC 316 fighters you might not know. I'm going to make this a new series on the channel, guys. The facts and stats video from the other day did very well. So you guys let me know you liked it. So if you want this to continue, do me a favor, drop a like on the video and drop a comment. Let me know if you knew all the facts and stats in this video about all the main card fighters on UFC 316 this weekend. So with that out of the way, let's get right into it, starting off with the main guy defending his title against Shaun Ali. People don't know that Merab Dvalishvili actually earned his shot to get into the UFC on Dana White's Looking for a Fight in 2017, but the way he did it was by spinning back fist KO. Isn't that crazy? Can you imagine a world where Merab Dvalishvili gets a spinning back fist KO? Well, you don't have to, because in 2017, that's exactly what earned him his shot to get into the UFC. Go and watch it on YouTube somewhere. But yeah, as much of a decision merchant as he is, he's got what Merab has, I think, a 13 fight win streak, and 12 of them are by wins by decision. So he only has one finish in the UFC against Marlon Moraes. And yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that Merab earned his UFC shot by getting a spinning back fist KO. Let's get on to the next thing, which is he actually started off his UFC career 0-2, which is kind of crazy with how dominant he is. He had losses to Frankie Saenz and to Ricky Simon by guillotine. So yes, Merab was actually submitted by Ricky Simon way back in the beginning of his UFC career. And maybe this was because he hadn't got his hair transplant yet, because hair transplant Merab is absolutely undefeated. Go back and look at his hairline at the start of his UFC career. It was absolutely atrocious. But yeah, man, it's kind of crazy that Merab went from 0-2 in the UFC to what, 13-2 now? Longest bantamweight win streak in history. Yeah. Let's get on to the next thing. Like I said, he holds the record for the longest win streak in bantamweight history at 11. He has 11 wins in a row at bantamweight. Technically, he has 12, but there was a fight. He fought a catchweight at 140, so that doesn't count for bantamweight. So as it stands, he's on an 11-fight win streak at bantamweight. And if he beats Shaun Ali, obviously he'll extend that record to 12. So yeah, Merab is one of the very few fighters in UFC history to claim a double-digit win streak. And lastly, he also has the most takedowns in UFC history. Before his fight with Umar Nurmagomedov, he was actually, I believe, at 85 takedowns, and he needed 5 takedowns in that fight to tie GSP. GSP had 90. He landed 7 for 30 takedowns on Umar Nurmagomedov, which set him as the record holder for the most takedowns in UFC history at 92, which is crazy because he doesn't even have he has just half the fights that GSP has in the UFC, but he has more takedowns. It's absolutely insane. This guy's a takedown machine. Literally, his nickname's the Machine. He takes down every opponent 10 plus times, it feels like, and just dominates them. So yeah, these are some facts and stats about Merab you guys may not have known. Let's get on to the next guy, which is Shaun Ali, who is returning to face Merab for another chance to win his belt back against him this Saturday. Starting off with Shaun Ali. Shaun Ali is actually 30 years old. A lot of people don't know this because of his clown hair and his goofy little persona he's got with smoking weed and all this other stuff. But yeah, Shaun Ali is 30 years old. He's the same age as me. Imagine that. Whenever I first saw this, like, dang, Shaun Ali is older than me. He'll actually be 31, I believe, in November. So yeah, Shaun Ali is older than we all think, boys. He made his UFC debut way back when he was like 22, which is crazy. It does not feel like Shaun Ali has been in the UFC for 8 years. But here we are, either when he was 22 or 23. But yeah, Shaun Ali is 30. His first UFC loss was actually due to a rare nerve kick to the leg. If you guys don't know, his first loss in the UFC was in 2020 against Marlon Chito Vera. He was actually controlling the action in that fight, looking very good, very fast, but Chito landed a very rare kick to the back of his leg, which hit the peroneal nerve, which shut off Shaun Ali's leg. Shaun Ali eventually went to the ground and was elbowed out cold by ground and pound from Chito. And after this loss, Shaun Ali notoriously declared that he was still undefeated after checking with the Sugar Athletic Commission. He pretty much coped about the loss and said it never happened. To be fair, he did avenge the loss and beat the hell out of Chito in the rematch. So there is something to be said about that. But yeah, his first UFC loss was due to a rare nerve kick. Granted, it didn't end the fight, but it led to the end of the fight. Getting on to the next thing, he actually tested positive for Ostarine back in 2019. Do you guys remember recently when Ryan Garcia, who was facing Devin Haney, tested positive for a substance that got his fight overturned and all that drama with Ryan Garcia? Well, Shaun Ali in 2019 actually tested positive for that same substance. In fact, a lot of UFC fighters have tested positive for Ostarine. It's one of the more popular positive tests amongst the drug testing community. And yeah, Shaun Ali actually tested positive back in 2019. People actually don't know this. So yeah, call him a steroid head. I don't know. He hasn't tested positive since, but that's very interesting. And last but not least, he has the highest significant strike accuracy in bantamweight history at 61.5%. So Shaun O'Malley lands 61.5% of his strikes, significant strikes, whenever he's in a fight, which is absolutely insane. If you want to go back and see a Shaun O'Malley masterclass in terms of accuracy, go back and watch Shaun O'Malley versus Chris Moutinho. That was one of the greatest striking accuracy performances I've ever seen. And yeah, man, if you can say a lot about Shaun O'Malley, but he is very accurate in the striking department. That's going to be it for Shaun O'Malley. Moving on to Juliana Pena, who is going to be defending her belt this weekend against Kayla Harrison. So the first thing about Juliana Pena that a lot of people don't know is that she actually has a submission loss to the flyweight champion in Valentina Shevchenko. People forget, man, in 2017, Valentina Shevchenko submitted Juliana Pena by way of armbar. And it's actually hilarious because Valentina Shevchenko at the time, I would say, was known as a striker. Don't get me wrong, she's always been a mixed martial artist, but she was primarily known for her really good striking. And it was kind of mind-blowing that she was able to submit the girl in Juliana Pena, who was known at the time, I think, to be more of a wrestler. So it was just kind of funny how that happened. She got submitted by Valentina Shevchenko. Next up, she is actually 4-3 in her last 7 fights, and she arguably shouldn't even be the champion right now. Go back and watch that fight against Raquel Pennington. That was an absolute robbery. And if they went the other way, Juliana Pena would be 3-4 in her last 7. Listen, the UFC might have had something to do with that that decision going her way because she talks more trash. To build up with Kayla Harrison would have been a lot bigger. And yeah, here we are. She's actually promoting the fight with Kayla Harrison, unlike Shaun O'Malley. But nonetheless, she is 4-3 in her last 7 for a champion that isn't the best record, I'll be honest. And last but not least, people don't know this, but she is the first mother to ever become a UFC champion. She had a daughter, and I forget when. It might have been 2019, 2020. And then she went on to defeat Amanda Nunes in 2021 to become the first mother to ever become a UFC champion. So that is a very good stat. Sure, Ronda Rousey is a mother, but she became a mother after her UFC career. Juliana Pena became a mother and then became a UFC champion. And I do think there's some admirable about that. So shout out to Juliana Pena. Moving on to Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison is getting her first title shot in the UFC after just 2 wins, but let's start off with her. She has actually never made 135 pounds in her career, so there's a lot of speculation that Kayla Harrison might actually miss weight this weekend because although she made 136 against Holly Holm, because there's a 1 pound allowance whenever you're fighting on a non-championship fight, but when you're fighting the champion, you have to make the exact weight. So there is speculation that Kayla Harrison might actually miss weight this weekend. We're going to have to wait and see, but she's never technically made 135 on the dot in her entire career. So I'm interested to see how she's going to look on the scales. She was handed her first loss in the PFL to Larissa Pacheco. I looked at Larissa Pacheco. I haven't seen too much of her fights, if any at all. I know she's a PFL merchant, and she has a win over Kayla Harrison, which is quite impressive by decision. And she has a loss to Chris Cyborg. So her only... I don't know. I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments if Larissa Pacheco is good, but she is the only girl to hand Kayla Harrison a loss. So there's that. Kayla Harrison is actually an Olympic gold medalist in judo. If you don't know, now you know. Her and Ronda Rousey, I believe, are both gold medalists in judoka. So listen, if there's anybody that could take Juliana Pena and hip toss her or judo throw her across the octagon and smash her face in, it is going to be Kayla Harrison because a gold medal in judo is no joke. She's the real deal. So yeah, man, that's an interesting stat for Kayla Harrison. And last but not least, she fought at 155 and 145 in the PFL. Kind of crazy that Kayla Harrison's ideal weight class might actually be 155 pounds, and she's almost forced to go down to 135. Not almost. She is forced to fight in the UFC and go down to 135, which she's going to be cutting a ton of weight because in the PFL, she fought at 155 and 145. I think 145 is okay for her, but ideally 155. And it's crazy that PFL actually has a women's lightweight division. I did not know that, but yeah, man, like I said, I'm interested to see how she's going to look on the scale this weekend. Let's get on to the next fight on the card, which is Kelvin Gastelum versus Joe Pyfer. Let's look at some facts about Kelvin Gastelum. So Kelvin Gastelum is actually a Hall of Famer. People don't know that, but not his career. His fight against Israel Adesanya recently was inducted into the Hall of Fame. If you guys have not seen Kelvin Gastelum versus Israel Adesanya for the interim UFC middleweight title in 2019, go back and watch that fight. One of the most insane fights you'll ever see. It was the infamous fight where Izzy looked in the camera in the 5th round and said, "I'm ready to die." That fight, Yeah, man, that was a back and forth absolute war. And yeah, I think it deserved it. One of the greatest middleweight fights of all time. So yeah, Kelvin Gastelum is a Hall of Famer. Moving on, he's actually the last guy to beat, I spelled Michael wrong, but he's the last guy. He retired Michael Bisping by KO in 2017. If you guys do not remember in 2017, people don't know this, but Michael Bisping, you guys don't remember, obviously lost to GSP, right? By submission. He got submitted by GSP. Well, it was supposed to be Kelvin Gastelum versus Anderson Silva versus the main event in Shanghai, China, I believe. Well, Anderson Silva pulled out. I forget why. Maybe he tested positive for steroids at the time. That might have been it. So Michael Bisping, 3 weeks after being choked out and knocked down by by GSP, steps in to face Kelvin Gastelum on 3 weeks' notice, just having taken a bunch of head trauma and brain damage. And he gets slept in the first round by Kelvin Gastelum. And Michael Bisping gets retired in that fight. He never fights again. So yeah, man, Kelvin Gastelum retired Michael Bisping. A lot of people don't know that. And last but not least, Kelvin Gastelum started off his UFC career when he was 11-0, and he is now 19-9. So this guy has gone 8-9 in his last 17 fights. It has been a tough one for Kelvin Gastelum. He's also 3-6 in his last 9. So he just is not the same guy. I think the sports kind of passed him up. He shows a lot of lack of discipline. He actually started off his UFC career as a welterweight, but struggled to make the weight. And yeah, man, he's moved out to middleweight, and he's just short and outsized there. So he usually gets manhandled. And even going back down to welterweight, I think last year or the year before, he got destroyed by Sean Brady. So I don't know what's next for Kelvin Gastelum. He made his UFC debut at 21 years old. He's now 33, I believe, so, or 34, still going strong. But yeah, it's been a rough one in the last 17 fights for Kelvin. Let's get on to Joe Pyfer. Joe Bodybags, the most salty man in the UFC history. Yeah, something interesting about Joe Pyfer. Dana White actually paid 1 year of Joe Pyfer's rent, I think back in 2022 or 2021. Joe Pyfer apparently was going homeless while trying to make a UFC career or MMA career, and he was struggling with money, and he told Dana White that, and apparently Dana White was like, not on my watch, you're not going to be homeless. He paid an entire year of Joe Pyfer's rent. So say what you want about bald Dana Pink, who seems to be dropping the ball these days. He did show out and show up for Joe Pyfer and paid a year of his rent. So I think that's pretty cool for Dana White to do. Shout out to Joe Pyfer. I hope he's doing well now financially. He has finished all of his UFC wins. So Joe Pyfer only has one loss in the UFC by decision to Jack Hermansson. He kind of got pieced up in that fight. But all 5 of his UFC wins come by finish. 4 knockouts and 1 submission. He actually submitted Abdul Razak Al Hassan, if you guys don't remember that, by arm triangle. People forget, man. And yeah, man, Joe Bodybags Pyfer is looking to be crowned the saltiest man. Oh, wait, he already has, because Lucas Tracy crowned Joe Pyfer the saltiest man in the history of the UFC. He started that meme, and I love it. Anytime you think of Joe Pyfer now, you just think of a guy from the salt mines. I mean, look at this guy's face. He literally looks salty. So yeah, shout out to Lucas Tracy. I think Joe Pyfer at the time, whenever Lucas Tracy made his saltiest fighters tier list, actually responded to him at media day and was pissed off. But yeah, Joe Pyfer 100%. He's the type of dude you look ask for a handshake, and he's like, what up? I'll beat your ass. Like that kind of guy. Joe Pyfer's just salty at the world. He's mad at everything. And yeah, it's kind of funny. It makes for entertainment, and I'm excited to see him versus Kelvin Gastelum. Let's get on to the next fighter, which is Mario Bautista, who fights Patchy Mix this weekend. Mario Bautista actually has a submission loss in his UFC debut in 2019 to Corey Sandhagen. That was so random when I saw this stat. I did not know this. Mario Bautista has a submission loss to Corey Sandhagen back in 2019. Very interesting stat. Yeah, man, people forget, man, Corey Sandhagen is Ryan Hall on the ground at bantamweight, apparently, because he submitted Mario Bautista 6 years ago, whenever Mario Bautista was just making his UFC debut. So there's some UFC lore for you. Corey Sandhagen getting a win over him back in the day. People also, if you don't know why Mario Bautista is hated, 99% of the UFC community knows this, but why is he hated? A lot of people don't like this guy. Why does everybody want to see this guy get his ass kicked? Well, it's because he lost any fans he had after the Jose Aldo fight. If you guys do not remember, he fought Jose Aldo, right, to a decision. And he was scrutinized by the fans because he was kind of getting touched up on the feet by Aldo, losing the fight. And he took the Merab Dvalishvili path. He held Aldo up against the fence for the entire 3rd round and got what a lot of people thought was a robbery decision against Aldo. And the fans were up in arms. And I think what made him really lose a lot of fans, if he'd have just not said anything, I think his career would have been fine, but so now he has a chance to go heel. But what really lost Mario Bautista fans is he went to the post-fight press conference and doubled down and said, yeah, I held Jose Aldo against the fence. Yeah, look, Marab did it too, and look at him, he's champion. I don't care. Screw the fans. And he pretty much doubled down, saying, I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm going to hold everybody against the fence. And yeah, people want to see this guy get finished ever since, and they're hoping and praying that Apache Mix gets it done. But last but not least, he also, if he wins on Saturday, he will be on an 8-fight win streak, which will be the second longest in the division. Yes, Mario Bautista is currently on a 7-fight win streak at bantamweight. And if he beats Apache Mix, who's making his UFC debut, he will be on an 8-fight win streak. So that's actually quite impressive. I know a lot of people don't like Mario Bautista, but you cannot deny this guy has skills. To go on a 7-fight win streak at bantamweight where this talent pool is really high is very impressive. So we'll see what he does this weekend. But yeah, here's some interesting facts about Mario Bautista. Getting on Apache Mix, who's actually making his UFC debut this weekend. Let's start off with something that a lot of people probably don't know. He's actually engaged to UFC strawweight Tatiana Suarez. So yes, Tatiana Suarez is his fiance. They are together. I'm not sure how long they've been engaged, but I didn't know this. Doing some research upon Apache Mix, apparently he is engaged to a UFC fighter. So congratulations to them. He has 20 wins, right? And 13 of his 20 wins come by submission. So if you're wondering what we can expect from Apache Mix this weekend, you can expect a very heavy submission game, as this guy has 13 of his 20 wins coming by submission. That's a lot of submission wins. That tells me he's a very grappling heavy fighter. He's going to be looking to get Mario Bautista to the ground and submit him. And not too much of a KO guy. I think he only has like 2 TKOs in his entire career. So yeah, the chances of Apache Mix winning this weekend will probably heavily depend on if he can get the fight to the ground and work his submission game. And last but not least, he is a former Bellator champion. He actually fought some pretty solid competition in Bellator. One of the better guys in terms of Bellator talent. And he fought at 135 in Bellator, which is arguably one of their most stacked divisions. I know Bellator is kind of a joke when it comes to level of competition, but their bantamweight division was actually pretty solid. Not to mention, this guy's a massive, and I mean massive bantamweight, 5'11", thick. A lot of people say that they don't understand how this guy makes the weight because he's such a massive bantamweight. But yeah, man, I'm excited to see him debut this weekend. Will it be Mario Bautista holding him up against the fence for another decision win, making the fans even more pissed? Or will Apache Mix add a 14th submission to his career? And we're going to find out this weekend. And his record overall is actually 20-1. He only has 1 loss. So it's very impressive to come into the UFC with a 20-1 record. Let's see if he can extend it to 21-1. Getting on to the next fighter, Kevin Holland. Now this stat is going to blow a lot of you guys' minds. Some of you guys will know this, but a lot of you guys might not know this. Kevin Holland actually, oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. Kevin Holland, despite debuting in the UFC in 2018, 10 years after Jon Jones. Jon Jones debuted in the UFC in 2008. Kevin Holland debuted in 2018, 10 years later, and he has more fights in the UFC than Jon Jones. That really goes to speak how active Kevin Holland is and how inactive Jon Jones is, because Kevin Holland has 25 UFC fights. Jon Jones has 24 UFC fights. I believe Kevin Holland is 14-10 in the UFC with 1 no contest, and Jon Jones is 22-1 in the UFC with 1 no contest. So he has 1 more fight than Jon Jones, despite being in the promotion 10 years less. That is absolutely insane. Kevin Holland is one of the most active fighters, if not the most active fighter in UFC history. You might have to give him that crown, because who fights more often than this guy? Getting on to the next stat, Kevin Holland in 2020 got 5 wins in 7 months. If you guys don't remember his legendary 2020 run, it was the one that ended in him KO Jacare off his back and retiring Jacare, pretty much. Jacare came back, I think, 1 more time, but Kevin Holland did not fight in 2020 until May. And despite not fighting until May, from May to December, he was able to get 5 wins, which I think is the fastest time ever to get 5 wins in UFC history, the modern era at least. So that's extremely impressive. For what we don't like about Kevin Holland, one thing you got to say, the guy's an active fighter, and he's always looking to get in the octagon. And last but not least, Kevin Holland was actually knocked out cold in one of his fights, but it's not what you think. In 2021, Kevin Holland fought Cal Dawkins and was actually knocked out cold by a clash of heads versus Cal Dawkins, and the fight was ruled a no contest. One of the most brutal head clashes you'll ever see. It was crazy to see Kevin Holland go out cold. He literally went like out cold. Go back and watch that fight. Kevin Holland, Cal Dawkins. So yeah, man, maybe Kevin Holland's chinnier than we think. I'm kidding. A clash of head would knock out a lot of guys. But yep, Kevin Holland, one of the most active fighters in UFC history, and him getting 5 wins in 7 months in 2020 is stuff of legends. Nah, I'm just kidding. Kevin Holland's definitely not a legend, but he is an active fighter. Let's get on to the last guy on this list. We got the silent assassin, one of my favorite fighters ever, Vicente Luque. Now, A lot of people know this, but a lot of people don't know this. He's one of the only fighters that I've ever heard of that actually got a brain hemorrhage after suffering a knockout to Jeff Neal. I think this was in 2022. Could have been in 2021. It was a few years ago. He got brutally knocked out by Jeff Neal and actually suffered a brain hemorrhage, which if you guys don't know what that is, it's basically whenever your brain is bleeding or has a hematoma. And it's very dangerous. And he actually considered retiring after this, I think. He had to do like a year of brain scans and tests to make sure he was okay. But ultimately, he did make his comeback. And people were worried about him because in his couple comeback fights, he did not look like himself. He looked like a shell of himself. And people wondered, did he take too much damage by getting that brain bleed? Is he ever going to be the same again? But better enough for him. He came back against Themba Gorimbo recently, and he got a submission win. So he seems to be in decent form. We're going to see how he looks this weekend. But yeah, man, scary stuff for Vicente Luque. Next up, he actually has a KO win over Belal Muhammad. This is actually one of my favorite KOs to go back and watch. You guys know how much of a fan I am of Belal Muhammad, and there's nothing I love more than to see Belal Muhammad get slumped. And yeah, man, he actually KO'd Belal, I think, back in 2019, maybe 2018. It was a while back, 6-7 years ago. KO'd Belal Muhammad, I believe, with a right hand. The only guy to KO Belal Muhammad in the UFC. So very impressive by Vicente Luque. That was before he kind of became a plotster that didn't move his head very much. And last but not least, he is the only fighter to ever submit Tyron Woodley. Now, granted, Tyron Woodley was on a 3-fight losing streak going into the Vicente Luque fight. He had his back against the wall, right? He had lost like 20 rounds in a row versus Gilbert Burns, Usman, and Colby. He didn't win a single round in all those fights. So Tyron Woodley came out guns blazing against Vicente Luque, and Vicente Luque was able to latch up his neck and secure a Bravo choke and submitted Tyron Woodley, the only fighter to ever submit Tyron Woodley. People have knocked him out, but they've never submitted him. He got knocked out by Nate Marquardt. But yeah, I'm excited to see Vicente Luque return versus Kevin Holland. I do think he's going to get a win over Kevin Holland, but we're going to have to see. And that's ultimately the facts about the UFC fighters on the main card fighting this weekend, guys. If I told you some facts or stats that you didn't know, let me know in the comments. These are actually really fun to research and know. I didn't know all these, but I knew a lot of them. But yeah, man, drop a like on the video if you guys enjoyed. I appreciate it. I'm out, and peace.